So which platforms does it support?
I'm sorry, what platforms?
Yeah.
It's very portable today. You can download Linux, Windows, Mac. We'll support other things if we have to. By the way, you can run it on heterogeneous networks, so you can mix those as much as you like. Fast machines, slow machines, it doesn't care.
So you had been on the grad circle, as you mentioned. So from last year to this year, how have you grown, or what did you learn?
Okay, good question. So how have we grown since last year? Last year we were actually in alpha release when we came to this show, and we went to beta. It went crazy. Actually, we were targeting having a very limited beta. I was expecting by this stage to have about 30 betas. As I say, we've got something in the region of 400 to 450 already. So it's gone crazy. Huge amount of work. This is a this is a radical new architecture. It's basically a peer-to-peer system. It doesn't have a single line of anyone else's code in it. It's a complete database written from the ground up to do the magic things that we're talking about. And so a huge amount of work has gone into building something that's robust and scales and so forth. As I say, today we've got something which is scaling to dozens and dozens of nodes on very high performance, including on EC2, delivering very high performance.
And all of your 400 some implementations, what type of is it in particular industry, particular type of companies?
Wide range. There's some surprises in it, actually. So we expected to see, of course, a lot of web-facing applications. Lots of people, if you remember that first slide I showed you, that have some version of typically a MySQL system, a Postgres system, a SQL Server system, something like that that's just reached its limits. And there's this presumption that SQL doesn't scale, which is just demonstrated to you as a wrong presumption. And so those are natural people. They're usually web-facing applications. But there are lots of others. There are people that are basically cloud service providers, because this system, if you think about it for a moment, it's on-demand capacity. It's the first time in the history of databases that you can genuinely run the cloud, and it's just about SLA and cost. And so for people that are wanting to run a database as a service, SQL database as a service with full transactional support, a lot of people that are in that category that are more like cloud operators. There are some others which I think one of the things that was a surprise, and I just skated over it earlier, is that because everything in the system is asynchronous, I didn't have time to talk about that. What it means is you can start, when you add another node, you add another machine, it doesn't really care where you add that machine. It's quite tolerant of bad latencies, which means it's quite happy for you to start that next one in London or in Tokyo or something. It also has redundant storage, so you can also put one or more storage nodes in each of those locations. So now you've got a distributed database. That was not one of the things that we came out last year really talking about. As we went out to market, people said, "You're kidding me. You've got a consistent, transactional, multi-site database." Sure. Not just drops out of the architecture. So that's a huge thing that's developed in the last 12 months.
So do you have any enterprise customers, or do you?
We've got over 400 customers that we're working with. The product's not shipping yet, so nobody's going to deploy a transactional database in a beta form, if that's the question.
No, if on your first day of deployment, do you think, are you ready? Is your product ready for big enterprise?
I think when we launch it, we'll announce some customers, yeah.
Do you think the initial traction will be more around transaction processing or analytics or some other area?
It's a good question. A comment was made by a couple of the presenters already, which is that actually customers don't like all this kind of separation of different databases if they can help it. And one of the nice things here is that although this is in principle a transactional database, it goes quite a long way down the track of being able to do analytics. The way the model works, you can run long-running queries in the system, and most of the system doesn't even know you're doing it. And so we see there are use cases where we see people are running something that's essentially an operational database, a transactional database, but that what they're wanting to do is analytics directly in that system. We can do it. The back-end storage of the system is a key value store. We can support arbitrary key value stores. If you put HDFS or something like that on the back end, you can have very, very large data sets on the back end of the system.
Not just you guys, but a couple of the other folks here. I mean, it feels a little bit like, just thinking about it from my myopic enterprise view here, but it feels like the days when Netezza and Greenplum and Vertica were all kind of coming up. There was a need, they filled it, then some of them got bought. There are a lot of you guys coming up with the next database, right? And
Yeah.
and I mean, I suppose the end question is 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, do you get bought by these companies or rolled up into these companies?
I mean, there is a kind of almost a sort of a cycle that happened around warehouse-style systems, which are analytical kinds of systems, and you named a number of them, the Greenplums and the Verticas and so on. What you're seeing now is people trying to solve this problem of how do you scale out transactions? How do you get an OLTP system that can run on dozens of nodes in parallel across the world? That's a very interesting and hard problem. And I think that the time is now for that. For sure, people are trying to solve that problem. And if we don't, we're in trouble.
Shane, you want to ask a question? Then we have a question up in the audience there as well. Shane?
Yeah, but just a little curious. So you're saying that you can add back-end nodes very inexpensively, and you can do it in multiple locations.
Yeah.
But if my query is in the United States and I've got pieces of the query being farmed out to England, as an example, how are you dealing with the latency issues?
Okay, so it'll surprise you that the system is not partitioned. Okay, when I say that you can have multiple storage nodes, the only reason you would do it is to have redundancy, which is a good reason, by the way. You do get some performance benefit, but the whole point is that we can give you a fully transactionally consistent second entire copy of your database, or third or 10th or whatever, wherever you want. And so there's never a situation where I'm looking for some data in a machine that's running in Boston and the data that it wants is in Beijing. That never happens.
We have one question in the audience, and we got to make it really quick because we're already a little over time.
I think I get your scalability story, but I'm curious as to how your performance compares with some of the other speakers who had, for instance, in-memory computing type of.
Yeah. I was saying to Eric yesterday, if all you want to do is, no, I shouldn't say if all you want, if the thing that you want to do is gigantically fast transactions and nothing else, then you need to have a compiler. And a good example of that is what they've built. We are a general purpose database. You can take us, you can replace your standard favorite SQL database with a modern scalable database. We'll do any kind of queries you want. It's very much a sort of a general purpose system for doing ad hoc querying and so forth. We don't partition, we don't do pre-compilation, we don't do any of that stuff. It's a general purpose system. So if your goal is just purely very, very high speed transactions and you don't need durability and the other things that we can give you, then we're not in that game.
Great, Barry, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
That is it. We're going to make sure you vote. There's the number. There's what you text to that number. We're going to have a, now 25-minute break.